If you ask a nurse, a janitor, or a patient what really haunts a hospital, they won't tell you about ghosts. They'll tell you about the hours after midnight, the hours when the machines hum a little lower, when the hallways stretch a little longer, and when the living aren't the only ones who need attention. Because after 3 a.m., hospitals become something else. Rooms no longer stay empty. Call lights ring from beds that were cleaned and stripped hours ago. And the shadows by the window, those aren't shadows. Tonight, 3 people will tell you what the day shift refuses to believe. Stories that only come alive after the world has fallen asleep. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from tonight? I love scrolling through the comments and seeing the places, different countries, different cities, where our midnight society gathers after dark. And if you enjoy these true horror stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more night owls, insomniacs, and brave souls find their way into our circle. Welcome to episode 1 of Mr. Bones' Midnight Society. Now, let's begin. Night shifts used to be my favorite. People assume days are where the action is in a hospital, the doctors rounding, families visiting, phones ringing nonstop. And sure, it's busy, but nights are different. Quieter on paper, but heavier in ways you can't measure. The hallways feel longer, the shadows feel thicker, and the silence isn't really silence. It's filled with beeping monitors, distant footsteps, and that low hum of machines keeping people alive. That's the part I loved at first. The feeling that it was just me, a skeleton crew, and the patients who needed us most. No administrators, no visitors, no chaos, just the work. This happened 3 years ago, when I was about 2 years into working as an RN on a med-surg floor. I won't name the hospital, but it's in the Midwest, an older building fused with a newer wing that never quite matched architecturally. Our unit was in the older part. Creaky floors, bad lighting, doors that didn't always latch right. We all knew the rumors about the 3rd floor. Day nurses rolled their eyes and said it was night shift superstition, but almost everyone on nights had a story. Equipment moving on its own, empty beds with impressions on the mattress, distant crying when all the patients were asleep. I didn't really believe in any of that, at least not really. I'm a science brain. I like labs and vital signs and numbers. Still, there were certain hallways I didn't linger in, and one room in particular that made me walk a little faster whenever I passed it. Room 3B. On the chart, it was just another semi-private room. On nights, though, it was almost always empty if staffing allowed it. Nobody ever put patients there, unless every other bed was full. We had stories, of course. One nurse said a patient had coded there years ago, and they never got them back. Another said there'd been a string of deaths in that room. A CNA who'd been there forever swore she'd seen a man in a hospital gown standing in the doorway at 3 a.m., only to find the room totally empty a second later. There was also the call light. The call light in 3B had a habit of going off when nobody was in the room. Maintenance checked it more than once. They replaced the button. They rewired the panel. It would behave for a few weeks, then start up again, randomly chiming on the desk, the little red light over the door flicking on, the monitor at the station listing 3B, nurse, even though the bed was stripped and the room was dark. Everyone hated being assigned anywhere near that side of the unit. We joked about it, but underneath the jokes was something else. A reluctance to admit that the place got under our skin in a way that couldn't be explained by bad wiring. The night this happened, I was charge nurse for the shift, short-staffed like usual. We had a full census and admissions coming up from the ER. By 11 p.m., I'd already walked about 10,000 steps according to my watch, juggling meds, charting, and answering call lights from a couple of confused patients who liked to press the button every time a commercial break came on TV. It was around 1:30 a.m. when we got the call from downstairs. We had another admit coming up. Post-op, stable, but needed monitoring. The only open room we had left? 3B. I remember looking at the assignment board, looking at the list of rooms, and feeling that little prickle on the back of my neck when my eyes landed on it. "Of course," I muttered. We debated moving another patient, but there just wasn't anywhere else. Every other room was occupied, and the nurse, taking that side of the hall, already had her hands full. "I'll keep an eye on them," I said. "Put them under my name and I'll float over." The patient arrived around 2 a.m. A middle-aged man, mid-50s, arms covered in faded tattoos. He'd had a bowel resection earlier that day. He was groggy but oriented. Anesthesia had worn off enough for him to answer my questions with quiet sarcasm. "Name?" I asked, scanning his chart. "Carlos," he said, "but you can call me the Walking Dead." "You're not allowed to die on my shift, Carlos," I said. "House rules." He smiled at that. His vitals were decent, pain tolerable with meds. The surgeon's note said he was doing better than expected for his age. He just needed monitoring overnight for blood pressure, pain, and any signs of complications. The room felt wrong the moment I stepped into it with him. It always did, but having someone in the bed seemed to amplify it. The air felt stuffy even though the vent was open. The overhead light flickered once before it came fully on, and there was a smell I couldn't place. Not infection or anything medical, just old, stale. "Is this the haunted one?" Carlos asked suddenly, his voice low. My head snapped up. "What?" He gave a weak chuckle. "The transporter who brought me up from Pacu said there was a ghost on this floor. Thought he was funny." He shifted, wincing. "This room feels weird." "That transporter is getting a strongly worded email," I said, checking his IV. "No ghosts, just bad paint and old wiring." He looked at the ceiling, unconvinced. "Had some weird dreams last time I was in a hospital," he said. "Saw people walking around that weren't there. My dad standing at the foot of my bed. He's been dead 10 years. He closed his eyes briefly. "I don't like hospitals." "Most people don't," I said. "You'll be out of here in a couple of days. Tonight, we just focus on breathing, resting, and not touching anything you shouldn't." I went through my usual spiel. Call if you need to get up. Don't try to walk alone. Use the call light if anything feels off. He nodded, already drifting toward sleep as the medication finally pulled him under. When I stepped out into the hallway, I tried not to look up at the red call light. Above the door, off for now. The nurse station monitor had his name neatly slotted into the 3B box, a little heart icon showing stable vitals. For about an hour, things were blessedly normal. I gave meds, charted, helped another nurse with a difficult IV. A CNA did rounds, taking vitals and tucking in blankets. Somewhere around 3 a.m., the corridor lights dimmed slightly. The automatic setting that always made everything look more like a horror movie than a place of healing. I was in the med room drawing up pain medication when I heard the first bing. The sound of a call light going off is one you get used to as a nurse. It blends into the background after a while, like the beeping of pumps. But that night, the tone sliced clean through the usual noise, sharp and distinct. I glanced up at the small monitor on the medroom wall out of habit. 3B. Nurse. I felt my stomach drop, just a little. Okay, I muttered to myself. Post-op probably needs pain meds. Just a normal call light in a normal room. I grabbed his morphine, double-checked the dose, and headed down the hall. As I walked toward 3B, I could see the red light above the door glowing softly. Everything else around it was dim and quiet. No voices, no TV sounds. Just my own footsteps and the faint squeak of my shoes on the waxed floor. I knocked softly out of habit before entering. Hey, Carlos, The room was empty. The bed was empty. The sheets were still neatly drawn up, untouched. The IV bag was still full, line primed and clamped off, just like I'd left it when he first arrived. But the call light button on the side rail was lit up red. I felt my chest tighten. "Carlos?" I called stupidly, as if he might somehow materialize from behind the curtain. I pulled it back. Nothing. The bathroom door was open. The small space inside was empty too. There was nowhere else he could be. If he'd gotten up and fallen, I'd see him. If he'd gotten disoriented and walked out, the bed alarm, which I had definitely turned on, would have gone off. It was still set, little green light glowing steadily. I took a breath and hit the cancel button on the call light. The red button clicked off. The monitor at the station reset. I walked back out, did a quick check of the hallway just in case I was losing my mind and he'd somehow wandered out silently. No sign of him. I checked his chart on the computer on wheels. No notes from the ER, no transport orders, no codes called, no rapid responses. Everything was normal. I told myself I'd made a mistake. Maybe I'd been paged for a different room and misread the number. Night shift brain is foggy, especially around 3 a.m. Maybe the bed had glitched. The system wasn't perfect. I went back to the med room, put the morphine away for the moment, and moved on to other tasks. About 20 minutes later, it went off again. Bing. I was at the nurse's station this time, charting. Every head turned toward the central monitor at the same time. 3B. Nurse. One of the CNAs, Monique, frowned. "Did you put someone in there?" "Yeah," I said slowly. "Post-op bowel resection. Carlos, I swear he was in there." I stood up. He must be really needy. Except he hadn't been. He'd seemed tired more than anything. The kind of patient you almost worry about not calling enough. "You want me to check?" she asked. "I got it," I said. As I walked down the hall, I felt a strange awareness of every sound. The hiss of oxygen from another room, the gentle snoring from 3A, the faint murmur of a TV from 3D. The red light over 3B glowed steadily. I didn't knock this time. I pushed the door open and stepped in fast, like ripping off a Band-Aid. Still empty. The bed was still made, untouched. The call button on the rail was lit red again. I felt a prickle along my spine like someone was standing behind me. I forced myself not to turn too quickly. "Okay," I said quietly. "Nope." I walked over, hit cancel, harder than I needed to, and backed out into the hallway. My heart was doing this weird stuttering thing, not quite racing, but not normal either. I went straight to the computer at the station and pulled up his chart again, scrolling back through the timeline. ER admit, surgery, transfer to PACU, orders for med-surg. And then, about 10 minutes after arrival to our floor. Transfer canceled. Patient remained in PACU due to borderline blood pressure. I stared at the screen. The timestamp lined up with about 5 minutes before I'd gone to the room the first time. My first thought was that the system had glitched. The order might have been canceled after he was already in the room. That happens sometimes. Except, I remembered bringing him up. I remembered joking with him. I remembered connecting his IV and going over instructions. I scrolled further. There it was. A nurse's note from PACU, time-stamped 1:58 a.m. Patient remained in PACU overnight due to hypotension, not transferred to floor. Will reevaluate in AM. My hands felt cold on the keyboard. "Hey," Monique said from beside me, making me jump. "You okay? You look pale." I swallowed. "Did you see him?" I asked. "See who?" "The new admit. Carlos, in 3B. She wrinkled her nose. "No. I thought you were kidding when you said you put someone in there. That room gives me the creeps." I opened my mouth, then closed it. I could have insisted. I could have said yes, I walked him into the room. Yes, I saw him in the bed. Yes, he talked to me. Yes, I hung his IV. But the documentation said otherwise. And if there's one thing a hospital trusts more than staff memories, it's the chart. The call light went off a third time at 3:33 a.m. That's the time stamped on the system log anyway. I see that number in my head sometimes when I'm trying to fall asleep. This time, I didn't walk down alone. The nurse at the station, Anna, rubbed her eyes and said, "I'll go with you. This is getting weird." We walked side by side down the hallway, the overhead lights buzzing softly. The red light above the 3B door was on again, almost pulsing in the dimness. I could feel my palms sweating. Anna opened the door. The room was dark. I must have turned off the light without remembering it the last time. She flipped the switch. The flicker seemed longer now before the overhead finally came on. The bed was occupied. For a heartbeat, my brain tried to split the difference between what I was seeing and what I expected. A man was lying there, on his back, head turned slightly toward the door. The first thing I noticed was the tattoos on his arms. The second was the empty, glassy stare. "Sir," Anna said quickly, stepping forward. Something in me knew before I did any of the usual checks. His skin was gray in that specific way that nothing living is. His chest was still. No monitor was attached, no IV pump running. No one had documented any of this. I stepped closer, my throat tight. His eyes were open, but there was no focus. His mouth hung slightly open, as if he'd been caught mid-breath and never finished inhaling. The hospital gown was the same pattern as earlier. The face was the same. It was Carlos. "Check a pulse," Anna snapped, already reaching for the emergency call button on the wall. My fingers shook as I pressed them to his neck. Nothing. No heartbeat. No carotid thump under my fingertips. I checked his wrist, more from habit than hope. Nothing. Anna had already hit the code button, but when I looked at the wall, it wasn't lit. The panel was dark. "What the?" she started. The overhead light flickered once, then twice. For a split second, the room went black. When it came back on, the bed was empty. I stumbled back, nearly bumping into her. The bed was still made. No impressions, no disturbed sheets. The pillow lay flat, the call light button on the rail still glowing red. There was no sign of anyone having been there at all. My heart was pounding so loudly, I could barely hear. "Did you?" I started. "I saw it," Anna said. Her face had drained of color. "I saw him. I saw someone." We stood there for what felt like a full minute, just breathing, listening, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. Eventually, she stepped forward and jabbed the cancel button on the rail. The call light clicked off. The red over the door went dark. We didn't say anything to the rest of the staff beyond a muttered, "Damn room's glitching again." There's only so much you can admit out loud in a hospital without feeling like you're inviting something in. The next morning, when the day shift came on, I checked his chart one more time before giving report. He never left PACU that night. His vitals stabilized around 4 a.m. He was transferred to a different floor the following afternoon, discharged 3 days later. He lived. I know, because I looked him up once more a week after that. I called down to the other floor pretending to ask about his follow-up labs. The nurse taking care of him laughed and said he was already home doing fine. I never saw him again. Not really. But sometimes, on nights when staffing is short and we're forced to use every room, someone ends up in 3B. And sometimes, in the quiet hours between 2 and 4 a.m., the call light will go off from that empty bed. Sometimes, when we answer it, the room is empty. And sometimes, if the stories from a few of the newer nurses are true, they get there just in time to see someone lying in the bed, a man with tattooed arms and a tired smile, before the light flickers and the bed is suddenly bare again. My name is Lauren, and I still work nights on that floor. I still walk past 3B. I still hear its call light, every now and then, chiming from an empty room. I don't pretend to know what happened that night. I don't pretend to know what I saw, or why a man who was physically somewhere else chose to show up in my room, in my empty bed. All I know is that, in a hospital, not every call light comes from a living patient. And some of the people who need us most are the ones we're not technically responsible for anymore. My name is Luis, and 8 years ago, I worked the night shift as a janitor at Riverview Memorial Hospital, a place that looked normal from the outside, but felt wrong the moment the sun went down. I took the job because the hours were steady and the pay kept the lights on. Cleaning floors, emptying biohazard bins, and mopping hallways seemed simple enough. But Riverview was old. Half the building had been renovated. The other half looked like it had been forgotten for decades. The layout made no sense. Hallways led into narrower hallways, ceilings dipped lower, and entire wings had been sealed off without explanation. My rotation that month assigned me to lower level C, the basement floor. It stretched under the hospital like a maze. Storage rooms, laundry, boiler rooms, the old morgue, and a psychiatric wing that had been shut down long before I worked there. Thick metal doors kept that wing sealed. No one ever said why. No one had to. You could feel the wrongness just walking past it. On my first night down there, my supervisor warned me not to linger around mirrors after midnight. "Clean and go," he told me, "and don't stare too long." I thought he was messing with me. He wasn't. The first strange thing happened at around 2 in the morning. I was mopping the corridor outside the locked psych wing, listening to the wheels of my mop bucket squeak across the old tile. The basement was cold, always colder than upstairs. But that night, I could see my breath in the air. A sign something was very, very off. I stepped into the utility bathroom to clean the sink and toss the trash. The mirror above the sink caught my attention immediately. It was spotless. Too spotless for a bathroom nobody used. I leaned closer, wondering who cleaned it besides me. Then, I saw him. In the mirror, not behind me, but in the reflection itself, sat a man on the counter, a hospital gown draped over him, his head tilted down as though listening for something. His face was blurred, like someone had wiped away the features. And slowly, he lifted his gaze until he was staring directly at me. I stumbled back into the stall door, his head tilted, studying me in that slow, unsettling way that animals sometimes do when they're figuring out what you are. Then he raised one hand and traced something on the glass from his side. The mirror didn't fog, didn't smear, but I saw the movement. His lips moved. No sound came out, but I understood him perfectly. "Let me out." I ran. I didn't stop until I reached the first-floor break room. When my supervisor found me pale and shaking, I told him everything. He didn't laugh. He didn't say I was tired or imagining things. He only asked one question. Did he touch the glass? When I told him no, he let out a breath like he'd been holding it too long. "Good," he said. "If he touches the glass, don't ever clean alone again." That was the moment I realized I hadn't seen a hallucination. I'd encountered something the staff already knew about. The next few nights were worse. Every time I passed a reflective surface, I'd catch glimpses of him in the polished side of a medical cart, in the darkened window of a sealed room, in the chrome finish of a mop sink. At first he was blurry and still. Then he began moving. Then he began mouthing words. Sometimes he tapped on the mirror, but oddly, I never heard the sound. Sometimes he appeared behind the reflection of my shoulder, too close, as though mimicking my movements. And sometimes, when I walked through a hallway lined with old patient room windows, his reflection would walk with me. The night he stood right behind me is the one that broke me. I was cleaning the main lobby restroom. Bright lights, constant foot traffic during the day, the safest place in the building. I bent down to pick up a discarded paper towel. When I stood up again, I caught my reflection in the mirror. He was standing directly behind me. Not distant, not blurred, close enough that if he had been physically present, I would have felt his breath on my neck. His face had gained definition since the first night. His eyes were wrong, lifeless, clouded, furious. For the first time, I heard him clearly, like he whispered into my left ear, "Let me out." I bolted from the room and didn't go back. A few days later, Riverview announced renovations. Lower level C would be closed for 3 months. I felt relieved, like maybe the nightmare would finally end. But hospitals have a way of carrying their shadows with them. On my last night shift, just before sunrise, I clocked out and headed toward the exit. Early morning light shone through the glass doors. For once, the hospital looked peaceful. Then I caught my reflection in the glass. He was standing behind me again. Not ghostly this time. Not fading. Solid. I spun around. The lobby was empty. But in the reflection, his hand lifted and pressed against the inside of the glass. When I finally turned away, a faint handprint remained on my side of the door. That was the last shift I ever worked. I didn't go back for my last paycheck. I didn't give notice. I didn't want anything that connected me to that building. Years later, I still avoid mirrors at night. Sometimes, as I'm brushing my teeth, I see movement that doesn't match my own reflection. Sometimes I hear tapping behind the glass. Sometimes I wake up to a faint handprint on my bathroom mirror. If you ever work the night shift in a hospital, avoid the mirrors, because some reflections aren't yours, and some of them are still trying to get out. This happened to me back in 2019 when I was 21 and thought the scariest thing that would ever happen to me in a hospital was a bad IV start. I've always hated hospitals. I know most people say that, but for me, it was a borderline phobia. The smell, the sounds, the way everyone walks fast without making eye contact. It all made my skin crawl. I avoided them as much as possible. Then my appendix decided to try and kill me. It started as this dull pain in my lower right abdomen that I thought was food poisoning or cramps. Within a few hours, I was curled up on my bed, sweating and shaking, feeling like someone was twisting a knife inside me. My mom drove me to the ER of the nearest hospital, the same one I've been talking about. I won't name it, but if you've ever been there, you'd probably recognize it. The next few hours were a blur of IV fluids, blood draws, a CT scan, and a surgeon telling me I needed an appendectomy sooner rather than later. I don't remember much of the surgery itself. One second I was counting backwards from 10. The next I was waking up in post-op, groggy and nauseated, with my mom's blurry face hovering somewhere near my feet. Everything went fine, a nurse told me. We're going to get you up to a room for the night. You'll be sore, but you're okay. I clung to that. I'm okay. I was young, healthy otherwise, and this was a routine procedure. I figured I'd be home the next day complaining about hospital food and posting dramatic selfies. I didn't know yet about room 417. They wheeled me up in a bed instead of a chair. I remember staring at the ceiling tiles drifting by like clouds. We took an elevator up. Someone cracked a joke about the deluxe suite upstairs, and everyone laughed except me because laughing hurt. When we rolled to a stop, I heard the nurse say to someone at the desk, "This is for 417, post-appy, stable." Another nurse said, 417? In this tone, like she was trying not to react. Then she caught herself. Right. Okay. We'll take her. I noticed that, even half-drugged. A younger nurse, maybe late 20s, pushed my bed down the hall. My mom walked alongside, hand on the rail. We passed a couple of other rooms, with doors half open, TVs flickering, family members in chairs scrolling on their phones. Then we turned down a shorter hallway with fewer doors. At the end of it, on the right, was room 417. The door was open, lights off. The nurse flipped them on with her elbow and rolled me inside. It was a single room. That's the first thing I registered. No second bed, no roommate. Just one bed near the window, a chair, a TV mounted near the ceiling, a small bathroom to the left. Lucky you, my mom said softly. Private room. The nurse's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. We'll get you settled, she said instead. I remember thinking the room felt stale. Not in a dirty way, just like no one had opened a window in a long time, even though, obviously, the windows didn't open. The air felt slightly colder near the far corner by the bathroom. They helped me shift from the transport bed to the room bed, one careful, painful inch at a time. The nurse hooked up my IV, checked my vitals, gave me a little button to press if I needed pain meds. You might hear some noise in the hallway, she said. We're a little busy tonight. but try to rest." As she was about to leave, another nurse, passing by, poked her head in. Older, tired eyes, that efficient aura you see in people who've been doing this too long. "Which room did you put her in?" she asked. 417, my nurse said. The older one's gaze flicked to me, then to the monitor, then back. "Is there nowhere else?" she asked under her breath. My nurse's jaw tightened. "Everything else is full," she said quietly. "We already have 2 in 415. We had to put Mr. Daniels in 403. The older nurse sighed and shook her head, like she wanted to argue, but knew she couldn't. "Okay," she said finally. "Just keep an eye on her. If she starts saying anything you know, don't dismiss it." They both looked at me at the same time then, like they were trying to decide how much I'd heard. I pretended I was too out of it to follow, but my brain filed that away. If she starts saying anything, saying what? By the time visiting hours ended, it was just me and the machines. My mom kissed my forehead, promised she'd be back first thing in the morning, and reluctantly left when the tech gently kicked her out. The sun went down somewhere behind the blinds. The TV played a sitcom I didn't care about with the volume barely on. Around 11 p.m., the hall got quieter. Footsteps were less frequent. The occasional voice drifted past, the low murmur of nurses giving a report, a cough from another room. My pain was manageable, thanks to the IV. The drugs made everything feel a little floaty, like I was underwater listening to sounds from the surface. I dozed on and off, never fully asleep. The first weird thing happened around 1 a.m. I know because I checked the clock on the wall when I woke up. I hadn't heard anything specific. I just woke up. The room was dark except for the small light near the door and the soft glow of the monitor next to my bed. My throat was dry. I reached for the little plastic cup on the tray table, but it was just out of reach. I hated the idea of pressing the call button for something as small as water when I knew night shift was short-staffed. Then I heard it. "Hannah." My name, spoken softly from somewhere near the foot of the bed. I froze. My hand hovered over the call button. I told myself it was a nurse. Maybe I hadn't heard the door open. Maybe someone had come in to check on me. I pushed myself up a little, wincing as my incision tugged. "Yeah?" I rasped. "Can I get some—" Nobody was there. The room was empty. The door was closed. I swallowed hard. The monitor beeped at me disapprovingly, registering my heart rate climbing. I forced myself to take a deep breath. Then another. I must have imagined it, I told myself. Pain meds can mess with your head. People hear all kinds of things in hospitals. I pressed the call button anyway. A few minutes later, the younger nurse from earlier came in. "Hey," she said softly, flipping on the small lamp near the sink. "You okay?" "Yeah," I lied automatically. "Just thirsty." She poured me a small cup of water and helped me sit up enough to sip it. Her name tag said Emily. "Do you ever have patients say they hear people calling their name?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She paused, just for a second, then forced a neutral smile. "Sometimes," she said. "Anesthesia can cause weird dreams. Plus, this place is noisy. You might have heard someone in the hall." "The door was closed," I said. "Sound travels," she answered quickly. She didn't look me in the eyes. After she left, I left the small lamp on. I must have dozed off again, because the next time I woke up, my TV was off. I was sure I'd left it on a low hum just so the room wouldn't be completely quiet. The clock said 3:12 a.m. The lamp Emily had turned on was off. The room was darker than it had been before. The only light came from under the door and the monitor glow. I was on my side now, facing the bathroom. The door was slightly ajar, just a dark sliver in the dimness. I don't know why I didn't immediately turn on the TV or grab the call button. I lay there, breathing shallowly, listening. That's when I heard the breathing that wasn't mine. It was coming from the other side of the room, near the window. Slow, steady, a little rough, like someone trying not to cough. I held my breath without meaning to. The breathing continued. Very slowly, I rolled onto my back, every muscle screaming in protest. The ceiling looked the same as always. I shifted my eyes toward the window. There was a shape standing there. Not fully solid, not see-through either. Just a human outline darker than the darkness around it. I couldn't see a face, just shoulders, head slightly bowed, hands hanging at the sides. It was right next to the window, between the curtain and the glass. Too close. The kind of close that would have left a fog of breath on the pane if it were a real person. My first thought was, there's someone in my room. Not a ghost, not a hallucination. A person. Maybe someone wandered in. Maybe a psych patient got loose. Maybe... "Hello?" I croaked, hating how my voice shook. The shape's head turned slightly, like it had just noticed I was awake. The breathing stopped. My hand scrambled for the call button, found it and pressed harder than necessary. The shape didn't move. For a horrible second, I thought the call light wasn't working. Then, I heard footsteps in the hall, the sound of the nurse's shoes getting closer. The door opened, letting in a wash of warm, yellow light from the corridor. Emily stepped in, looking a little bleary. "Hey, what's..." She stopped, her eyes fixed on the space near the window. Her hand tightened on the door handle. The shape was still there. "You see that, right?" I whispered. She didn't answer. Slowly, she reached back and flicked on the overhead light. The room flooded with brightness. The corner by the window was empty. I started shaking so hard the bed rattled. "I need you to tell me if you saw that," I said, voice high and thin. "Please, please don't say it was nothing. Please." Emily hesitated. Her eyes flicked from the window to me to the monitor. "Your oxygen's fine," she said instead. "Heart rate's elevated. That's normal when you're in pain and scared." "Please," I said again, tears spilling over. "You looked. You stopped. You saw something." She closed her eyes briefly, like she was making a decision. "We have had patients say they see someone in that corner," she said finally, voice barely above a whisper. "You're not the first. Usually around this time of night." "Is it someone who died here?" I asked. Her jaw tightened. "Try to rest," she said instead. "If you see anything else, call, okay? Don't get up on your own." That didn't answer my question. She left the overhead light on when she stepped out. I was too afraid to ask her to turn it off. The next time I woke up, my mom was back, sitting in the chair by the bed, scrolling through her phone. Morning light pushed past the blinds, The room felt less threatening with the sun somewhere out there. "You look like you got hit by a truck," she said gently. "Rough night?" I almost told her everything. The voice saying my name, the thing by the window, Emily's reaction. Then I pictured her staying up all night in the chair, scared to blink, and I swallowed it down. "Just weird dreams," I said, "and pain. But I'm okay." The surgeon came by, said my labs looked good. I could go home that afternoon if I kept down clear liquids. Several times during the day, different staff popped in and out. CNA for vitals, dietary for food trays, another nurse when Emily's shift ended. Every single one of them glanced, at least once, at the corner by the window. None of them lingered. Right before discharge, an older nurse I hadn't met came in with my paperwork. Her badge said, "Charge, Denise." She went over the usual instructions: don't lift anything heavy, watch for fever, follow up with your doctor. When she finished, she hesitated. "How was your night?" she asked. Not in the polite, scripted way, in a very specific way. I looked at her closely. "Honestly," I said, "it was weird." Her gaze softened, like that confirmed something. She moved a little closer to the bed, voice low. "This room used to be part of oncology," she said. "Back before they built the new wing. We had a patient in here years ago, young guy, about your age actually, in and out a lot, long stays. He liked to stand by the window at night, according to the nurse notes." I swallowed. "What happened to him?" "He passed during a night shift," she said. "Peacefully, as much as that word ever applies. His family was there. It wasn't traumatic, not like some," she sighed. "But after that, people started saying they saw him. Just a shape, really, by the window, like he was still looking out." "Why this room?" I asked. She shrugged one shoulder. Maybe it was the last place he felt something. Comfortable, in a weird way. People can get attached to even crappy rooms when they've spent enough time in them. Her eyes flicked to the corner again. "We try not to put anxious patients in here if we can help it, but last night we were overflowing." "Did anyone tell me that before admitting me?" I asked, a little bitter. "They're not supposed to," she said. "We don't want to scare people, and officially this is just a room with a view of the parking lot and a slightly squeaky vent." She paused. "Unofficially, some of us talk, night shift especially." "Do you believe in it?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "I believe patients know their rooms, and sometimes rooms know their patients." She handed me a folded piece of paper. "If you ever feel weird at home, more weird than just, 'I had surgery and I'm traumatized' weird, call your doctor. Or call us. Sometimes things follow people. Sometimes they don't. But don't sit with it alone." That was not comforting. I went home that afternoon. The first couple of nights, I chalked every odd noise up to the house settling and my body healing. I had some fragmented dreams, beeping monitors, the sound of my name in the dark. Normal post-hospital stuff, I told myself. Then, about a week later, I woke up around 3 a.m. and saw someone standing by my bedroom window. Same outline, same head tilt. My heart shot into my throat. I fumbled for the lamp, knocking my water bottle over in the process. The light clicked on. The corner was empty. I sat there shaking, listening for unfamiliar breathing. There was only mine. The next day, I called the number on the paper Denise gave me. I expected to get a general line or some random voicemail, but it went straight to the unit. "Fourth floor nursing, this is Denise," a familiar voice said. "It's Hannah," I blurted. "From 417. You gave me this number." There was a pause. "How have you been?" she asked carefully. I told her about the figure by the window. She listened without interrupting, without laughing, without trying to logically explain it away. When I finished, she sighed softly. "Did it feel like he was focused on you?" she asked. "Or just there?" "I don't know," I said. "It felt like he was where he always stands, and I just happened to be there too." "Okay," she said. "That's better than the alternative. Sometimes it's not about you. Sometimes you're just overlapping." "That's supposed to make me feel better?" I asked. "It's supposed to make you feel like you're not being hunted," she said dryly. "Which matters. Listen, if it happens again, try saying out loud, 'This is my space now. You can stay if you're quiet, but you can't scare me.' You'd be surprised how often that helps." "You really talk to ghosts in your hospital?" I asked. "You'd be surprised what we do on nights," she said. "Sometimes patients need reassurance we're there. Sometimes whatever's left of them needs it too." It's been a few years since then. For a while, the guy by the window, if that's what he is, showed up in my room every few weeks. Always around the same time. Always standing in the same place. Shoulders hunched a little, looking out at nothing. I started saying the thing Denise told me. "This is my space. You can stay if you're quiet, but you can't scare me." It felt ridiculous at first. Slowly, the fear dulled. He never got closer. Never moved toward the bed. Never said my name. Eventually, the visits stopped. Or maybe I just stopped waking up when he was there. My name is Hannah, and I still won't visit anyone on the 4th floor after dark. If I have to, I stay in the doorway. I don't step inside room 417. And if you ever find yourself in a hospital room that feels colder in one corner, where nurses glance at the window more than they should, pay attention. Sometimes you're just renting space from someone who never really checked out. And there you have it, guys. 3 stories of spine-chilling paranormal experiences during hospital night shifts. If you enjoyed tonight's stories, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps our Midnight Society grow, one brave soul at a time. And to all of you watching from every corner of the world, thank you for sitting with me by the fire tonight. Until next time, I'll be waiting for you right here, around our campfire, Mr. Bones' Midnight Society members. Sleep well, if you can.